Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Blotz in the Fox 9 studios in Minneapolis, and welcome to our live streaming coverage of Day 9 of the civil rights trial, the federal civil rights trial against three former Minneapolis police officers who assisted in the arrest of George Floyd the day that he died. Now, these three officers are J. Alexander King, Thomas Lang, and Tu Tao, and they are accused of depriving George Floyd of his civil rights on that day, May 25th of 2020, when he was arrested for passing a $20 counterfeit bill at the Cup Foods in South Minneapolis. Of course, the fourth officer who was involved that day, Derek Chauvin, he has already pleaded guilty in this federal civil rights case, but he is serving a 22-year prison sentence for the death of George Floyd. That sentence came down, of course, last year. Joining us now is Rob Olson. He has been in the federal courtroom for the proceedings here since this trial started, and he's joining us now live from the courthouse. Rob, let's pick it up right where the testimony began this morning, because we had a repeat witness from yesterday afternoon. Her name is Nicole McKenzie, and she is with the Minneapolis Police Department, and she's one of the medical trainers, correct?
Yeah, and she testified previously in the Derek Chauvin murder trial, too, pretty extensively. She took the stand yesterday late afternoon, a little bit before 4 p.m., and was on the stand until they broke around 4:30. So about a half hour to 45 minutes yesterday she testified. So that picked up again this morning. Yesterday, basically, they got through, they start every witness with going through their background, their training, their education, how they got into the role that they're in. So they kind of got through some of the biographical steps yesterday before getting more into the questioning today about the training that she gives and her knowledge of the training that she gives for Minneapolis police officers when it involves medical training. So very specifically, how often officers receive CPR training, for example, and what they're taught to do in various circumstances. And a lot of her answers come back to the same thing. There's a lot of repetition here in her answers, even though the questions vary. But one of the things that she mentioned early on this morning is if you're not getting a pulse within 10 seconds, talking about restrained people going unresponsive and checking their pulse, and a lot of talk about the carotid arteries being the place that you're trained to check a pulse, which they didn't do with George Floyd, partially because Derek Chauvin's knee was in the way of checking that pulse. But she said if you cannot detect a pulse after about 10 seconds, then you should begin CPR. So again, the prosecution, the federal prosecutors here, in this case it was Alan Slaughter doing the direct questioning, asking her when CPR is supposed to begin, and she says 10 seconds, within 10 seconds of not being able to detect a pulse, testifying too that the carotid artery in the neck is the best place to check it, and then you move down from there. Officers in the scene there, Tao and King and Lane, were checking pulse on the ankle and the wrist, not the carotid, mainly because they couldn't get to the carotid artery unless Derek Chauvin removed his knee.
And part of the testimony also this morning revolved around her training to the officers that suggests that if a person becomes unresponsive, you then roll them onto your side. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, and that was an answer that we've heard many, many times throughout this trial already from other medical professionals as well. And from her, I've heard it repeatedly, that same answer given to a variety of different questions, because it is sort of the standard thing that you do in a number of different situations. It's called the side recovery position, where if somebody has trouble breathing or they go unresponsive, or once they're restrained, once they're not resisting, what's the training? And the training is to roll them onto their side to make sure that they can breathe, because the face down prone position is where people can struggle to breathe. So through a number of different questions that she was asked about, as they walk through the timeline here of George Floyd being restrained on the ground, her answer repeatedly was, The training is you move them into a side recovery position. So, for example, they were showing body camera video from one of the officers and playing this for maybe 20 seconds at a time, in which you hear George Floyd say, "I can't breathe." And so this begins immediately after he comes out of the squad car and is down on the ground, stops it and says, "What's the training here when somebody says they can't breathe? You should roll them into the side recovery position." Then they went on to play more of the video, and it shows that he is handcuffed, that he's not, that he is basically under control. He's not able to actively resist as much because he's handcuffed. What's the training say? To move them onto their side. Play a little bit more of the video, and he's now going unconscious. He's slowing down. What's the training say? That you should move them onto their side, into the side recovery position. So that is something that we've heard repeatedly from her, repeatedly from other medical testimony too, that is the training, and that is not what happened here. And of course that goes to proving the charges here that George Floyd was denied medical aid, and that was the violation of his constitutional rights.
Now we know that George Floyd, when he was on the ground, repeatedly said, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Questioning today to Officer McKenzie about the statement there in the scene that day from one of the officers that's saying, if you can talk, you can breathe. And she was asked specifically about that and how that works into police department training. Walk us through that as well, Rob.
Yeah, and that question has also been asked of some of the other medical experts that have taken the stand as well. The paramedic, certainly the doctor from HCMC, now Hennepin Healthcare, that was on the stand early on. And she was asked about that too, because you hear that in the bystander videos and certainly the body camera videos where one of the officers says, if you're talking, you're breathing. And so that question comes up with many different witnesses, and with her testimony here too, and I'm trying to get here onto my notes to get the exact quotation here. If a person can talk, it means they can breathe, she's asked. Her response is, "That is not something that we train." That's a quote, and continued in quotes here. Even if someone is able to articulate something, you can't count that to mean they're getting a sufficient supply of oxygen into their lungs. That is something we heard yesterday from the pulmonary expert from Boston, who said too that you can get enough oxygen to say something, but that doesn't mean you're getting enough sufficient oxygen to sustain your tissues and your organs, that you're able to speak a little bit, but that doesn't mean your body is sufficiently oxygenated to continue living.
Rob, they were showing a lot of pictures today, even going over some of the body cam video from the officers themselves, and a lot of objections came up from the defense attorneys, and these objections are being sustained somewhat by Judge Magnuson here, and I'm just reading into this because I'm not in the courtroom, but I'm reading into it suggesting that perhaps the judge is worried about some of this video and evidence becoming prejudicial to the jury. In other words, it's become too emotional for them to see this over and over and over again, and may taint some of what they're thinking about this trial.
Yeah, and that has been something that came up and was established very early on, was addressed in some pretrial proceedings as well, about concerns, certainly from the defense attorneys, about the overplaying and overuse of some of these, disturbing videos that can be tough to watch. I mean, some jurors during the questioning said that they deliberately didn't watch some of these videos or didn't watch them again because they're difficult to watch as a man lays dying on the pavement of a street in Minneapolis. So the judge is wanting to be very careful that when you show these videos, and they show them all to get them into evidence, but not to keep re-showing them without specific points to the video that you're addressing with a witness. Let's view this. With many of the witnesses, they're showing still frames with the medical experts, certainly. Let's show a still frame from the video so you can see where a knee or a hand is positioned, or the position of George Floyd's body on the ground. And again, so the judge is very concerned about the overuse of that and the emotional response, that gets from a jury, that's not fair to the jury to subject them to something that's disturbing, and maybe not fair to the case either if it becomes overly emotional rather than fact-based. So here too, as the prosecutor was showing continued portions of this body camera video to ask the training office here, Nicole McKenzie, what should be done in this situation, what should be done. That was where the objection came up that, okay, this is getting repetitive, we've seen this, and the judge says, yes, you can't just keep showing this over and over for the same question or the same response. You got to move on. If you've not got something new to ask, let's stop showing these videos.
Rob, just before the lunch break here, the prosecutors wrapped up their questioning of Nicole McKenzie, and one of the first defense attorneys had her chance to cross-examine her. Bring us up to speed here on the timeline here, because I'm hearing that this particular attorney said he had a lot of questions for her.
Yeah. In fact, when he came up to start his cross-examination around noon, he had said to the judge, hey, do you want to take an early lunch break? Because I'm going to take a while. I've got some pretty lengthy questioning. And the judge said, nope, let's go to 12:30 and we'll take a break then. So we did. And he really, again, this is Robert Pauley, who's one of the attorneys, along with his daughter, for Tou Thao. And he had gone through, again, some of the training that Nicole McKenzie had received in kind of leading up. Basically, some of this stuff gets a little kind of plotting is maybe a word for it, because attorneys have to set the foundation. They have to kind of establish a base of information that they are then questioning will take off from. Yeah, so they did that before he got into asking specifically about a PowerPoint training presentation about excited delirium, that controversial term of, that officers are trained about, that some had, that there had been a question about whether George Floyd was in excited delirium. Thomas Lane had asked that at one point. And there is a specific picture in a PowerPoint training that shows a person restrained on the ground by three others, and one of those has a knee on that person's neck. And then she was asked about what she had told investigators and prosecutors during a meeting on July 6th of 2020, and to recollect what she told them in that interview about this specific training slide. She was reading the transcript of that, and that was multiple pages. So at that point they said, you know what, maybe we'll take a lunch break to let you read that over lunch rather than sit here for 4 or 5 minutes in silence. And so that's where we ended at that point. But again, it's going to that picture in excited delirium training, which is part of the training that officers receive with the medical training that shows basically this exact knee to the neck restraint that happened with George Floyd.
Rob, are we expecting another witness on the stand today?
I would expect so. I would expect that since we've begun cross-examination here, even though Robert Pauley said he's going to take a while, he's always gone first in a cross-exam, and he's usually takes the longest. And of the other two, I don't know how much they're divvying this up in a sense, but then the others are asking more specific stuff about their clients' actions. So I would imagine, though, we will get through cross-examination and expect another witness on the stand. She is, by my count, the, I'd have to look at my notes here, 12th or 13th prosecution witness on the stand.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Now in the third week. So I would expect we would get somebody else on the stand yet this afternoon, but no idea who that could be because they're not telling us who they're calling.
All right, sounds good. Rob Olson, coming to us from U.S. Federal Courthouse in St. Paul today. Thanks so much for giving us a wrap up today's testimony. Again, the afternoon session will get underway here at about 2 o'clock, and we will have a complete wrap up tonight on Fox 9 News at 5 and in the rest of our newscasts as well. We invite you to join us there, and we will be back here at approximately the same time every day, right around 12:30, between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, as the judge lets everyone go for a lunch break. You'll find us here at the same place, fox9.com, and on our YouTube channel for Fox 9. My name is Tim Blotz. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tonight at 5 o'clock.